Hello, everybody. How are you doing? I'm glad you're here. It's 3 p.m. on the 16th of October. I'm Dr. Nelson Vasquez with Kiltz Health, and I am in Central Florida. Please let me know where you're watching from and put the comments in the chat. Let me go live on Instagram. All right. All righty. So today we're going to be talking to Michelle Hurn. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And you said you are in Portland?
Right outside of Portland, yes.
Okay. All right. So thank you for being with us here. It's noontime for you. And just let me say hello to some people here: Sharon, Cheryl, Rick, Juliet. Thank you for being here. Angela, Amy. Hope you're doing better from your accident. GFG Homestead, Karen from Lakeland, Earl from Columbus. Okay, we have Sue Middleton from Southern Oregon. You didn't say the city, but main runner from Maine, and George Goodenough from the UK.
Oh,
Hello.
wow.
All right. Goret Teixeira from South Africa. We're all over the world. Well,
Love
thank
it.
you for being here. And I was just backstage telling you that I've been promoting your book to some of my friends. You wrote this book a few years ago, though. It's not exactly new. That what is it called? Dietitian's Dilemma?
Yes, published in
Okay.
2021, correct.
Okay. All right. So please go ahead and take a few minutes and tell us about your story, your pre and post diet changes. And we were talking because you're a registered dietitian, and your typical training is nowadays, and it has pretty much always been more plant-based approach because meat is bad, right?
Yes, to some degree. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm Michelle Hurn. Like you said, I'm a dietitian. If you've heard me speak before, my health journey began when I was 12. I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. I was 5 feet tall, 57 and a half pounds, so incredibly underweight. Ended up going to treatment for 2 months, immediately put on the 24-hour tube feeding system, which back then the ingredients were corn syrup, maltodextrin, soy protein, canola oil. Fast forward today, the ingredients are the exact same, which is pretty unfortunate. During that time, I was told that if I did become weight restored, people don't really recover from eating disorders. I would have these issues my whole life: anxiety, racing thoughts around food, probably relapse several times. And they weren't wrong. I did become weight restored, but I struggled a lot through my adolescence and into adulthood. I wanted to become a dietitian because I just had this intuition. There was something in nutrition I was missing. At that time, I thought, like you were saying, I need more plants, I need more antioxidants. To be a dietitian, you get your 4-year degree, and then you go into an internship. And during my internship, there were a lot of things that I questioned. For example, you would go into the room with someone with type 2 diabetes, very elevated blood glucose, and my preceptor would say, okay, we're going to teach them to eat carbohydrates consistently throughout the day so they can dose with insulin consistently throughout the day. And I would just ask questions like, well, if their blood sugar is high, should we teach them to eat less carbohydrates to get their blood sugar down? And I was just kind of pegged as this like difficult dietetic student. We went to the room with someone with a traumatic car accident, and I looked at the tube feeding. They were on a tube feeding formula, nasogastric. And I was like, oh my gosh, this was the same thing I was fed when I was 12. I was 24 then. I'm now 42. Same ingredients. But, when I became a dietitian, I just saw the revolving door sickness. People come in with acute infections and type 2 diabetes, and then, heart failure, kidney failure, cancers, all kinds of things. And you just start to, your doctors would often say, like, it's not the guidelines, it's just the patient's not following the guidelines. And, at that time, I was also an athlete. I was training for marathons. And then in 2019, I had my own kind of health crisis. Like, my running performance felt like it fell off a cliff. My anxiety was at an all-time high. I was underweight. And that's when I transitioned to, for 30 days, I did like a pure carnivore diet and then transitioned into more of a ketogenic diet. And it felt like my mental health just completely flipped. I went from being very anxious to feeling calm. My muscles stopped hurting. I started sleeping better. And of course that, this was the end of 2019, led me down the rabbit hole of really exploring, like, oh my gosh, like, and I was shocked. It's embarrassing to say now, but I had no idea. Nobody during my, years of college and the internship and, I did some grad school, like, introduced me, like, here's all these studies. I mean, Jeff Volek, Eric Westman had published really good studies on low carbohydrate diets reversing type 2 diabetes. And so I, of course, very naively thought I would be able to bring these into my institution. Oh my gosh, we'll be able to help people with type 2 diabetes. We'll be able to do all this stuff. And I was told pretty quickly, like, no, we have to prescribe the guidelines. It's an insurance reimbursement. It's a, legality. And so I left the clinical setting in 2020. I didn't think I would be able to run anymore, but I went from marathon. I now do ultra marathons, and I've been pretty successful. And yeah, now I'm very grateful. I get to work with Dr. Mariella Glant, and I'm very hopeful that there will be more opportunities like I have now, where I get to work with people with type 2 diabetes, putting them on a very low carb animal-based diet. And what do you know? We get to reverse type 2 diabetes. So yeah, and I've joined Dr. Berry, Dr. Westman, Ben Bickman, Tony Hampton, and 3 other amazing dietitians, Shannon Davis, Shanna Husson, Temple Stewart. We've created the American Diabetes Society, where we're advocating low carbohydrate nutrition. And it's just, it consider it like my gift of gratitude, right? To be able to give back. I've been very fortunate to, I know Jan Bazuki talking about low carbohydrate diets and mental health. So I'm grateful. I'm happy to be in this space. I know nutrition is nuanced. I'm never dogmatic, but I've seen it especially be very powerful when it comes to reversal of disease.
Thank you. That was a very brief summary of, but you hit many points there. And it's interesting. You mentioned when you yourself had the problem that we're trying to put on weight on you, and hey, you gotta gain some weight no matter which way it is. But it seems that we know how to make people get fatter, and we think we know how to get people to slim down. But it's interesting that people who have farms know that if you want to get a cow, beef, gain weight, you give them grains, right? You give them soy or corn, wheat, whatever, oats, and it has the same effect on humans when you load your plate with those things as well. So it's not a surprise that you mentioned the corn syrup, and I know they criticize very often medical doctors. Oh, you didn't get enough nutrition classes in school, but trust me, the very little I got was with that little wrong approach. And yes, yeah, have 3 to 6 meals a day, loaded with carbs, and then shoot insulin to counter the effect, right? And
yeah, it's very interesting because we know insulin suppresses fatty acid oxidation, right? Like, it shuts down your body's ability to burn fat. And I would say 98% of the type 2 diabetics I work with are very over fat, not just obese, but have, excessive body fat. So it makes sense. Like, why would we give you something that doesn't allow you to access your own body fat? Why wouldn't we bring insulin down? And we've been able to demonstrate. I mean, we've been able to get people off insulin. That was one of the first studies I read by Dr. Westman. I mean, they got someone off 150 units of insulin in 8 days. And, Dr. Mariella, who I work with, we've titrated people off over 200 units of insulin in just a few weeks when you're following that lower carbohydrate diet.
So you see this guy over here?
Yes, I do. I'm guessing that's you. And
300 units of insulin a day.
Wow.
And having been a physician for nearly 41 years now, I am probably in the top 5 of amounts of insulin. I don't, as a matter of fact, I don't think I treated more than 2 people in my career with higher amounts of insulin.
Interesting.
So I've been carnivore for now 2.5 years, and I've gone 6 months at a time sometimes without having any insulin, but back and forth I do use a little bit. My pancreas no longer, I was diabetic for almost 30 years, so my pancreas doesn't produce much insulin anymore, so I do have to use some. As a matter of fact, I probably had not used for a week, and yesterday I used combination of short and long acting, about 25 units, but my hemoglobin A1C has been 5.4 for the past almost 2 years.
Great. Congratulations.
I've done it about 6 times, I think. I'm due to have another one, and I have a kid here, so I'll be soon repeating it. But yes, just have insulin. Your blood sugar is high, use the medications, use the insulin to control the blood sugars. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I know some of you have already put some questions. Let me take a look and make sure I haven't.
Yeah, and we're finding, right, that's just, it's like one piece of the puzzle. I in my overwhelming experience. Hi, Michelle. I have no idea. Oh, hey, thank you. I appreciate that.
This is not a question, but a comment. But all right. So
very much appreciate that. And we're finding that it's how nutrition impacts it. It's nuanced to some degree, right? Because like you said, so much of our country, and I know we have people listening in the UK and in South Africa, and I know unfortunately it's happening around the world. People are metabolically unhealthy. They have type 2 diabetes. They have obesity, which means, you have insulin resistance. You have elevated insulin. So following a diet that keeps that low, I feel like my 6-year-old niece could figure this out, and it's not like we don't know this. It's not like, the government, everybody knows this. It's just, if we start teaching this and we start healing people, there's billions of dollars industries, pharmaceuticals, food companies that are spending astronomical amounts of money to keep this under wraps. Right. But anyway, once you reverse your type 2 diabetes, often, not necessarily like it sounds like in your case, you have to still take some insulin, but often people are able to incorporate some carbohydrates back into their diet. A lot of people, metabolically healthy humans, can eat some seasonal stuff, and that's what we're finding. We want to be able to be metabolically flexible, where you can burn both glucose and sugar and fat. But our population is so incredibly sick; they are just unable to burn fats, and we do everything wrong. Ideally, you get up in the morning, you get some sunlight. We get up and we look at our phones. Ideally, you move your body, you do some resistance training. We sit at our desk all day. Ideally, you're filled with joy. You have good, healthy relationships. We argue with each other online. You suck, And so by shifting not only how you eat, in my experience, it also started to shift other things in my life. When I was calmer because of my diet, I was able to have better conversations. I was able to have energy to get outside and do other things. And so I find this. I find it so frustrating, and I'm sure you do as well, and while you do this advocacy, that we're not talking more about this. This isn't getting like more mainstream, and it seems like just when you get some momentum, you get a lot of resistance. But I think the best thing, we can do is I like to call it like an insulin smart diet. We're following an insulin smart diet. We're eating protein and fat, and then we're utilizing carbohydrates in relationship to our goals and our metabolic health. Because obviously, my 400-pound A1C of 12, type 2 diabetic, it has a very different carbohydrate need than Michelle Hurn, who runs 80 miles a week, or maybe someone I'm working with who's very underweight, who might need to pull that insulin lever to help gain some fat, right? So it's not a one size fits all, but there definitely is a structure that I think works for everybody.
Yeah. And sometimes I know I did at some point, you have that aha moment where, in very simple terms, you discover, okay, wait a second. If, in particularly, the type 2 diabetes is one of my passions, to try to help people reverse that, which now I advocate for remission, reversal. Cure is a word that I don't like to use because and there is a question here about cure. I'll ask you in a second,
Okay.
uh, but remission, reversal, I think we don't have to argue much that that's possible, because we have now hundreds, if not thousands, of people or more doing it every day. When you think that if you're loading yourself up with carbohydrates and you're diabetic, which is the ultimate metabolic dysfunction in my mind, uh, well, that's not going to help you if you have to be chasing with medications to increase your insulin. Whether is there are some pills that help you do that. There's the GLP ones, and there's, of course, insulin. Uh, and you mentioned right now multiple things that have absolutely nothing to do with nutrition, but they're also important, right? And we can talk a little bit more about sleep and community and sunlight and exercise, right? All those things, they have nothing to do, we think, with nutrition, but they actually do, because they do affect the way your body responds with cortisol and
Yeah, they
how,
impact metabolism. Sure.
yeah, they do impact metabolism. Okay. So this is an interesting question, because we still have a lot of people, vegan and vegetarians, in this world, and many of them are healthy or think they're healthy. And I've known personally a lot of people, lifelong vegetarians. Although I'm 65, I mentioned, and just recently discovered that a friend who had been vegan or vegetarian all her life, or for most of her life, developed multiple sclerosis. And she moved away. And I don't know if she's here right now, but she moved away. So I had not seen her for a few years. And I keep having interviews with people with multiple sclerosis. I'm better after, some of them very short periods of time on being carnivore. So I'm trying to reach her, to send her the YouTube videos. When I finally get in touch with her, and of course I still had her phone number. I thought she had changed that. She has been carnivore for a year, and because she's in a new area, her neurologist told her, "No, you don't have multiple sclerosis. You were mixed diagnosed because your MRI is totally normal."
Hmm.
She goes, "Well, I have my old MRIs here. Here they are." And they had all the hallmark changes that you see on imaging of MRI. She was correctly diagnosed. Just a few months on carnivore, not only she doesn't have in her brain MRIs, she doesn't have any symptoms of it. She's still dealing with adaptation, and she's not 100% carnivore. She does have more of a very low carbohydrate intake, a ketogenic diet. But these things, not only is the blood sugar, but all the autoimmune, the inflammation, the inflammatory problems, pain, arthritis, skin issues, they that seem to get better. So I'm excited to see for the next few years more studies coming out. But I think we already have a strong picture on some of these things, right? Okay, so Juliet says, do you find clients do well on vegetarian keto diet as well? So I'm sure you advise some people that are vegans or vegetarian on
Yeah,
how to do a ketogenic
we have
diet.
a
So
lot of people in the program, the Ona Health that I work with, Dr. Mariela Glant, that are Hindu, Indian. That some people are very strict vegetarians, and some people eat, will eat eggs and cheese. Some people not. Some people strict vegan. I will say it's interesting. Even like books. Gosh, I'm totally blanking on her name that wrote about type 2 diabetes. I want to say, oh, I'm going to butcher it, but she's a vegetarian, but she even realizes like, hey, this is probably the less ideal way to attack this type 2 diabetic problem. But to answer the question, yeah, you can absolutely be a very successful vegetarian. You can be a successful vegan. I know I said at the end of my book, like, if people are following that way of eating and they're healthy and happy, like, I have no agenda here. We do know that animal products, specifically the ruminant animal products, are very high and very bioavailable nutrition, meaning there's lots of the B vitamins, iron, zinc, folate that your body absorbs very well. Those things are much harder, if not some don't even exist. Things like collagen, perform vitamin A, K2, D3 in the plant kingdom. So you can certainly supplement. And if somebody is doing that for a religious reason or a health reason, we certainly work with people. It's just, one thing you have to be very careful of is, we, in the past, before I was very familiar with low carb, working or knowing vegans, they would say like, oh, I'm going to get my protein from quinoa or beans and rice, these things that are very high in carbohydrates, so it's like we have to really eschew some of those things. And I would say about 75 to 90% of the vegetarians, all vegans I've worked with, will do some type of protein supplementation, a pea protein isolate, something where, if you're on an animal-based diet, you don't necessarily, you don't need to drink any protein powders. So is it possible? Can you do it well? Absolutely. It just takes a little bit more planning, especially for making sure you're getting enough of those nutrients.
a lot of planning. And if you're just, I'm going to go vegetarian, you have to, in particular, when you go to the extreme vegan side, you have to supplement a lot of things, including the B12, for example. You have like no B12 from plant sources to speak of. So you have to supplement with these things, with the omega-3, sometimes with the animal source nutrients, because many of the plants bring with them not only, for example, the iron. Spinach is very high in iron, but it is also very high in anti-nutrients that stop your absorption of iron. So
I would
they
also
come.
argue spinach is not necessarily very high in iron.
So we get the story of the heme iron and the non-heme iron there. But yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can do it. It's just, in my opinion, I'm sure you would agree. It's certainly not the easiest thing to do. It's not the most
Definitely,
effective thing
definitely.
to do. A lot of people have reactions to a lot of plant foods. It's interesting how many people, we all kind of naturally associate like all vegetables are good for us, spinach is good, and then they take those things out of their diet and they're like, wow, I'm less achy, I feel better. So that's why I think doing a low carb, specifically like more of a carnivore diet, it's the ultimate elimination diet, right? And then when you add things back in, you can be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that peppers cause this. Or some people add things back in, like I do some rice, I do some carrots, no problem. I've tried other things and it's like, ooh, this makes my stomach feel awful. I've been eating this for years, I had no idea. So yeah, but I do think, obviously as a medical professional, we work with people all kinds but in general, that most people tend to gravitate towards more of the animal-based diet.
Yeah, interesting. You said peppers, because black pepper uh, gives me some joint pain. As soon as I
Interesting.
have some black pepper, and you don't think of those things. Well, you season something, and if you happen to have liked black pepper, uh, and you didn't think it was part of the problem, so I personally had chronic pain. I'm not blaming only the black pepper, uh, but it's one of the things I discovered by eliminating and then trying to add it back on that doesn't, I may like it, but it doesn't like me back.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of people, and black pepper isn't a nightshade, but a lot of people struggle with like the chili peppers, the red peppers, eggplant, potatoes. I mean, like you were saying, there's the oxalates, there's the lectins, and it's so individual depending on your gut barrier, your tolerance. Some people have things and they have no issue. Some people have some and they have like massive either GI or pain or anxiety.
So the way I approach with patients or clients talking about the diet, I think, and you already insinuated this, there are different levels of carbohydrate that people will tolerate. And it might have to do with the individual, the lifestyle, different things. The past few weeks, there has been this noise around the internet about some carnivores adding back some carbs. And of course, a few years ago, a big carnivore added like 200 to 400 grams of carbohydrates a day on fruits and honey. But he also exercises 3 or 4 hours every day surfing, okay? And he's able to tolerate that. So if you're able to tolerate it, good for you. I couldn't do a diet like that because I don't spend 3 hours exercising every day, and I would be in a diabetic coma if I did that. So I cannot just blindly say, "Oh, I'm going to add some fruit because this doctor or this other doctor said I'll be okay."
Hey, look at you thinking for yourself. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's ideally, as we know, and we've already covered this, there's no better way to eat than a insulin smart, high protein, high fat, low carbohydrate diet when you're metabolically unhealthy. When you have type 2 diabetes, you're obese, you have other issues because it's going to bring your blood sugar. So let's say now you get your A1C, it's 5.4, you're feeling pretty good. All of a sudden you're like, my energy's not great. Like, I don't know, maybe something's up with my hormones. What's going on? And what I don't want is it seems like some carnivores and people have like the fear of God, like, oh my God, if you have some carbs, you're going to spontaneously combust. That's ridiculous. There's no species throughout history that was either pure carnivore or pure vegan. We ate roots and stuff like, obviously, humans, that's another reason when people are like, meat, it's bad for you. I'm like, the human race would not exist if meat was bad for you. We literally evolved eating the megafauna. Like, people are ridiculous. But we also ate, when you, through history, when we carnivores, you ate fur and you probably got more probiotic bacteria, you're eating dirt and so you're eating other things. And that's all to say, like, we don't have to be dogmatic. Most people, metabolically healthy people, can tolerate, and Dr. Gabriel Lyons, about 40 grams of carbs per meal, about 120. That's probably high, a little bit high in my opinion, for someone who's not physically active. I'm incredibly physically active. I'm an ultra runner, so I'm going to be tolerating probably, like you said, an amount, not like, I think Paul has, like you said, astronomical amount.
But you say you run 80 miles a week?
Yeah, one of my trainings high, yeah, approximately. So anywhere between 55 and 80. I think the most I've ever done in a week is close to 100 miles. So yeah, but I'm very fat adapted. So I'm oxidizing a lot of fat, which is wonderful because I don't have to take in quite as many carbohydrates. But I'm also not afraid to take them into, strategically to support performance, to potentially support, hormonal health, and make sure my, energy and blood sugar is stable, to just to support my overall person. And so that's probably like my biggest message, is we start with this foundation of the animal-based diet. And from there, like, you should move and eat what your metabolic health and your goals determine. Like, there's no gold stars for being zero carb, and there's no gold stars for, being Paul and seeing how many carbohydrates can I shove in my body, 400 plus or whatever. But there's in my opinion and experience, most people are very sick, so they need a very low carbohydrate diet. But I also work with people that are just like, God, I've been doing carnivore low carb for a while and I'm just not feeling right. So it makes sense, if all your labs are pretty stable, like, why wouldn't we experiment potentially adding a few things back in? And then most people are like, oh wow, now I eat 40, 50 grams of carbs a day and I'm totally fine. So
And I know of a coach that I have had in this channel here, that she was very strict keto, and she reversed many problems, including diabetes and obesity. And now she has added some carbs, even has some potatoes sometimes. She keeps up with a very active lifestyle with exercise. And she's, I've met her and her husband many times, very fit. And she's still in ketosis even when she has a potato.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I
So
can be in ketosis with 150 grams of carb. Like you can, like, and that's the thing. It's where is my metabolism, right? What is my activity? So I appreciate you bringing up that point because I think it's just my as much as this space I've loved and appreciated being able to advocate low carbohydrate diets. And what do the statistics say, right? 93% of us are metabolically unhealthy, so we need very low carbohydrate diets. But then there's kind of like an and then. Right? If you're not feeling good or you're able to like, okay, I'm healthy, now what? Or I'm getting more active. Like I just would never want people to be afraid to add something back that could potentially benefit them.
you mentioned your own experience, and I'm sure you still consult with many people with mental illnesses in general, and you had your own experience with anorexia. There's a question here. Noslo says, "Can carnivore cure dyslexia?"
Once again, I would never use the word cure. And I don't know. I mean, we do know, they're very good studies. The Bazuki group has funded some really good studies on bipolar disorder and schizophrenia that you actually see changes. Like they look at brain images, MRI images, like really, really detailed images. After about 6 weeks, getting people into ketosis on lower carb diets, you see changes in two areas of the brain, the anterior and posterior cingulate cortex, that have to do with kind of like being more like riled up. I can't think of that word, riled up. And so, can it cure dyslexia? Like, I mean, it would kind of make sense to me if your brain is functioning better. May it improve? Might you start to be able to put things together better? Potentially. But I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know if there's I've never come across any research on that, but that's an interesting thought.
So my opinion on that is anything that's brain related probably is going to improve,
Yeah, I would agree.
because especially after reading Dr. Christopher Palmer's book on brain energy, Dr. Ead's book on change your diet, change your mind, and all the research that's been done, and meeting even some people who were schizophrenics, full-blown schizophrenic, with hallucinations and everything, and they're no longer on medication, but on a very low carbohydrate diet or carnivore diet, and they have been able to improve their symptoms. That's so of course I don't use the word cure either, but we can talk about remission and reversal, and still appease the hardliners on the other side that are going to fight you on using that word. But anxiety, depression, bipolar illness, schizophrenia, so that's all over the place on the spectrum of mental illnesses, but also improvement in dementia symptoms, Alzheimer's. Now, it's not a cure for Alzheimer's once you already have Alzheimer's, but it can improve the symptoms a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was a
Uh,
study about the activities of daily living improved with people put on the ketogenic. I mean, once again, you're just getting a different substrate to your brain. You're not depending on glucose. You're getting some ketones and free fatty acids, so your brain's going to be functioning differently and potentially better. So
so, and then even if it's autoimmune, but on the brain, like multiple sclerosis, ALS, and all these things that unfortunately we haven't found perhaps a cure. But if I tell a patient with multiple sclerosis or of ALS or any other neurodegenerative condition, hey, you can try this, and we can see if your symptoms improve. And if they improve, anyone suffering with chronic conditions will get benefit with improving their symptoms. They'll probably stick with eating that way.
100%, yeah. Why? And that's, I think, why this way, a lower carb diet for most people is very sustainable, because they like how they feel. They like the food, they like how they feel. All right, so husband, type 2 will control with diet, but needs to gain weight. Doc said he follows diet strictly once a month. Insulin, so oh, interesting. Yeah, needs to gain weight. That's pretty unique. A lot of times people with type 2 diabetes are overweight, but somebody who needs to gain weight, there's a couple different things you can do. One, are you eating enough, just enough calories and enough volume? So the blood sugar is high. Yeah, because that is a lever I pull. I do have people that are really struggling with weight gain, and we do add some carbohydrates back in. And so I guess it would depend just like how insulin resistant he is. Because if he's like not producing any insulin and you add carbs back in, his blood sugar is just going to go up. So, I mean, yeah, that would be something I would just potentially discuss with your doctor. And it could be a very short-term thing. Like, hey, we've got to put on, I don't know, just hit my computer, how underweight he is. I'm going to just make an arbitrary, he's 20 pounds underweight. So this is going to be a month or a couple month thing. We're going to do very small amount of insulin, and then increase his overall protein and fat as well. So yeah, I think
So,
that's
in a case like this, it would make a difference between just generally adding more fat and protein on the diet, or adding half a cup of honey every day. There,
a lot of honey. Half a cup of honey.
I'm exaggerating, but just obviously it would probably make a difference, because we might increase the total amount of food in general, but not something that increases your blood sugars or your own insulin, because many type 2 diabetics, what they do have excess insulin anyway. So I guess this would be the perfect patient to consult with someone.
Yeah, that's true. I've never. Have you seen a type 2 diabetic with high insulin that's super underweight?
Good question.
Because normally when your insulin is elevated, it's really putting fat storage. Because you can have like normal. This is wild, y'all. You can have normal blood sugar and A1C, and just be really overweight. And it's your insulin can be. You get a fasting insulin test, and it's like 50. It's like off the chart. So, yeah. I mean, this is somebody you guys should email me. I'd be happy to talk more about this. That's an interesting case.
By the way, where I usually leave this question for later, but you mentioned it. Where could we find you?
Oh, yeah. So my website, thedietitiansdilemma.net, you can directly contact me to say, hey, I'm interested in chatting or whatever. That goes directly to my email. I am on Instagram at Run, Eat, Meet, Repeat. I'm on X at Michelle Hurn RD. You get to do some of these things, so you can always see me, on some random podcasts and stuff.
So, of course, the quality of the food that you are eating that contains a carbohydrate is important, because one of my favorite things used to be, I can't stand it right now because I smell the artificial ingredients in it. I would stop to put gas in the car, would go inside and grab an apple fritter or 2 or 3, of course. I can add carbs by adding a cup of apple fritters a day, or I can add carbs by having some vegetables and some fruits, using them judiciously. The impact on my blood sugar is going to be different, right? Uh, so the quality of the things that you put in your mouth, of course, makes it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's a one thing. Oh, I'm sure there's people that would argue dietitians are nuts, but like most sane humans will agree that ultra processed foods are not ideal for human health. Like if you're going to eat carbohydrates, some fruit, some high quality vegetables, some starch, rice, sweet potato, something like that. Don't go eat a box of Oreos or all that kind of stuff.
I am trying to taper off exogenous Tresiba insulin. By the way, I use Tresiba, but don't use it all the time, because on days that I am running 80 or 90 of blood sugar on average, I don't need anything. But sometimes, depending on, even if I'm strict carnivore, sometimes my blood sugar might be higher, and some other times it's lower. But my C peptide is like almost not detectable. It's very low. I am not a type 1. I just exhausted my pancreas over 30 years of abusing it. Anyways, down to
But I would
30
have to defer
units.
that question to you since I'm not a doctor and can't give medical
Down to
advice.
30 units. What is the best way to continue? C peptide is 1.4. What that means, you are producing some insulin, because 1.4 it's I believe is normal, in the lower range of normal, but it is normal. So you do have some insulin production from your pancreas. I think mine was like point 0.3 last time I checked. Anyways, so how do you do that? Well, you do a gradual reduction and checking your blood sugar all the time. You most likely wear a CGM. Hopefully, you do. If you don't, uh, you should try to request one. Insurance companies will cover it when you're using insulin. And basically, you have to monitor what you eat, what your blood sugar is in response, and then trying to taper off. Of course, there are many other factors like improving your sleep, the amount of activity you do, exercise, all these things. When I don't sleep well, or if I only sleep a couple of hours in the night, my blood sugar is going to be higher. What a concept.
Yeah, and
Uh,
activity, like that is one of the things, even if you are a type 2 diabetic, you don't need insulin to get glucose into your muscles when you're exercising. So that's another really powerful lever. We see people say their blood sugar, I'm just gonna throw up an arbitrary number, is like 220 after they eat. And then the next day they eat the same thing and it's 185. You're like, well, what'd you do? Oh, I went for a 15-minute walk. So it's pretty powerful. It can really help get your blood glucose down and
yeah.
require less insulin, even doing short activity after eating.
All right. Let me see.
Exciting questions.
There's another question here. Carnivore 2 years. The glucose tolerance test. Fasting 5.7. After 2 hours is 8. This is not in the US, but um, that's uh, a little high. I told GP how I don't do carbs. Sugar wants to
I
retest.
feel like Dr. Bickman and Dr. Westman have talked about this, and I apologize, I don't remember the exact mechanism, but there was something that if you were pure keto, you would fail a glucose tolerance test. And I can't remember the exact mechanism why. And they said if you just had a little bit of carbohydrates a few days before, you would pass with flying colors. So I don't
So
know
there,
if that you know more
yeah,
about
there is a natural insulin suppression that happened. I call it physiologic insulin suppression. Because if you're not eating carbs or very little carbs, then your pancreas decreases its function. But this is a typical patient where I would definitely, well, it's not the typical. I would order a fasting insulin, C peptide on probably everyone who has any issues with pre-diabetes, diabetes, or any other metabolic dysfunction, but most doctors won't. But this would be definitely a patient where I would like to know what the pancreas function is, because maybe you're already not producing uh, any insulin. Now, if you were not diabetic and you're failing a glucose tolerance test, yes, Dr. Bickman, and I listen to them, by the way, uh, all the time, both Dr. Westman and Dr. Bickman. So if you're going to do a glucose tolerance test, maybe add some carbs for a few days before you go and do that test, because as Dr. Bigman explains that usually the pancreas is ready to release some insulin, and it gets released in two phases. Uh, but when your pancreas says, well, you haven't been using this insulin, I'm not going to store more. I'm not going to even produce enough to keep this. And all of a sudden you challenge the body with a lot of carbohydrates, your pancreas says, wait a second, wait for me to produce some. So that blood sugar is going to rise until your pancreas keeps up with it, and you're probably going to fail your glucose tolerance test. So many more details I would need to know here. If you're already a diabetic, then it's very likely you're going to fail it anyways, because you already have some insulin resistance or severe insulin resistance. And so it depends on many factors. All right. Take this off. Is Michelle going back to?
I was supposed to.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to be able to make it this year. It's TBD. Gosh, I was really hoping. I actually have a ticket, so I may. If I don't, I'm going to roll it over to next year.
Okay, we're already 4 weeks away.
Better figure that out, right? Yeah.
Exactly 4 weeks. November 14th. We are going to be there. Kiltz Health is going to have a booth, and we have a lot of people. As a matter of fact, Lois, who's asking the question, is asking because he's going to be there with us.
Oh, nice. It's great. I went a few years ago when I was in Austin, and it's just just a great gathering, great information. So we will just see if life can let me get there.
The comment very similar to what we've been talking about. Your pancreas needs a wake up if you're going to do a GTT. It's basically, now you could still fail the test even if you have done what Dr. Bigman advises, for example. And it might be because you are truly insulin resistant enough, and maybe you're diabetic already. There are many, many reasons. But if you've been, like the question, for a couple of years being strict carnivore, you're not putting any carbs in your body or very little, then you might want to prime the pump and see if that has an effect on the glucose tolerance test. All right, let me see if I haven't missed a question here. Okay. What is the dietitian's dilemma?
Dietitian's Dilemma is my first book, and the kind of subtitle was, "What would you do if your health was restored by doing the opposite of everything you were taught?" I was taught from the time I was very young, going through eating disorder treatment, and through my high school, adolescence, certainly the college and the dietetic internship, that carbohydrates were the foundation of human nutrition. For everybody, regardless of your disease, and I became really sick. And, when I went to a much lower carbohydrate diet, it completely changed my health. But then I was in a very precarious position because, like we talked about earlier, I don't know if you're here for the beginning. Once I changed my health, and I spent, hours researching, ketogenic diets and type 2 diabetes. And at that time, we have so much more studies now. This was 6 years ago. I wanted to bring it into my hospital institution. Like, I didn't feel like I could ethically go into a type 2 diabetic room and tell them to eat consistent carbs, knowing that I was keeping them sick. But then what do I do? Am I going to lose my job? Like, how is this going to work? So that was my dilemma. And thankfully, I was in a position after financially figured it out that I left the hospital, and it's been hard. I mean, I won't lie. And that's why a lot of people don't leave, because, thankfully now, so I left in 2020, and just last year was the first time I had an opportunity to actually work in low carbohydrate nutrition. And until then, it was just like hustling. When I first left, you go from making like $40 an hour to like minimum wage, working like manual labor. It was awful, but it was also good. I needed to get out of that setting. But yeah, how do we, once you discover like what actually helps people? Because I have a lot of dietitians email me and say like, "Oh my God, what do I do? This is terrible. Like, I'm keeping people sick, but I need insurance. I'm paying for my family through this job. Like, what do I do?" So that's the dilemma. Like, how do we actually function when our education and often the requirements of the system we're in are, for lack of a better word, forcing you to give terrible advice? And it's on Amazon. It's a good book.
It's on Amazon. Is it also on Audible?
It is, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I read it on Audible.
I actually may have bought it on Audible. Or I have so many books on my queue there to listen to.
I
Uh,
appreciate it.
uh, all right. So I I'm sure if they go to your website, which is called the dietitiansdilemma.net, you said, right?
Yeah, there's
Uh,
links to everything on there. There's
yes.
links to the books, there's links to some projects I'm doing, to the American Diabetes Society. So, always happy to answer questions, appreciate the support via books. So yeah, I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. There's one other conference I may have to get to, and it's a balancing act with the dog and the uh, in life. So I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Angela Mullins said about her book for me and my daughter that is a nurse.
Oh yeah, nurses are incredible. Like I could never be a nurse. Some of the things they have to deal with and see. But it was interesting to me in the hospital when I worked in acute care, even discussing this. Like once I understood, just how important like low carb for nutrition was, nurses seem to understand that. I would go and say like on a like just basic level, but they're like, yeah, but they order carbs, we have to give them insulin. Like that's just how it is. So gosh, I'm hopeful that more nurses will get excited about low carb nutrition because it's hard. I mean, it's hard to treat people like type 2 diabetes is awful. Like, first, people, I mean, rotting teeth, open wounds, like, massive. It's not pretty. So, being able to actually help people, and people don't heal when their blood sugar, well, they don't heal well, your wounds, especially when your blood sugar is really high. So, being able to actually help people heal and relatively quickly, it's the best, absolute best.
However, still in 2025, October 16, 2025, when you get admitted to a hospital and you used to be in the system, even when you have type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes, you get admitted, you get a diet, and it seems to still be, 40-50% of the calories are coming from carbohydrates, right? And then the doctor will put a insulin coverage order because they can eat whatever they want and just will chase it with insulin. So, what are my choices if I end up in the hospital? Can I normally ask in the hospital for a higher meat, no carbohydrate type of diet? What is the dietitian of the hospital going to say, or the kitchen, or
They might be annoyed, but they might lecture you. But yeah, that's one thing. I mean, to like wrap this up, is nobody is coming to save you or fix you. If anything, people are coming to take advantage of you, prescribe medications for you, feed you shitty food. Like, it is up to you to take your health back. And you absolutely have rights to say, I want double protein, I want no carbohydrates. If the dietitian freaks out and insists carbohydrates come, throw them in the trash. You can have people bring you outside food. That's no problem. You can fast if you're obese or overweight. Nobody can force you to do it. I mean, literally, unless you're deemed like mentally like when I worked in mental health, if you have to have a guardian, you can't make your own decisions. Nobody can force you to do anything you don't want to do. So make sure, if you are in a situation, and it's just talk to people, just even travel, like take care of yourself, like pack healthy foods, make sure you know what you're doing. If you're in the hospital, order protein foods. Okay, it's I have to get a second tray, it's $5. Okay, do that. It's amazing the excuses people will come up with to continue to feed crappy eating habits, make excuses to fix your eating habits.
so. Yeah, first of all, you have to speak up. You don't have to argue or fight.
No.
They're doing their work. They're trying to help you, but just, hey, I don't eat this, or I prefer to eat this. And unfortunately, most of the time, the hospital's not going to be able to accommodate 100% what you're asking for. But you mentioned you can fast, for example, especially if you're overweight. Uh, you can fast, or you can have people bring you food
Yeah. And
from
most
the
of the time on
outside.
the floor, they'll have some type of protein stuff, whether it's they have hard boiled eggs, they'll have some cottage cheese, they'll have, it's just, there's like a, I mean, they have a lot of crappy food too, but there's often like a required, like they call it nourishment room. So,
Yeah, so eggs and some beef patties
yeah, there you go.
probably would sustain you, and I'm sure they'll give you. I mean, if you're eating salads, like you can add a little bit of lettuce and tomato, I guess, to it. But the squeaky wheel gets the oil. If you don't say anything, nobody's gonna come to offer it to you. And you mentioned you're in charge of your own health, so just take charge of that. You don't have to be that patient who starts arguing right off the top, because trust me, nurses are not gonna like you.
Be kind and
Very
respectful. Like nurses, their job is the hardest job, one of the hardest jobs on the planet. Like I just the
yes.
things they deal with and see and whatever, you know. But in my overwhelming experience, when people say like, "Hey, like I'm really doing this for my health," can you? Even if it's okay if I need to wait, is it okay if I get a second serving of eggs? Like, oh, instead of one burger patty, can I get two? Is that a? If you're kind, I promise you, 99% of the time, people are happy to make it happen.
All right. One more time, where can we find you? Your website is?
Yeah, the dietitiansdilemma.net. I am on Amazon, The Dietitian's Dilemma. I also have a children's book called The Fox Family Food Fight. Instagram at Run, Eat, Meet, Repeat. And then on X at Michelle Hurn RD. And yeah, thank you so much again for having me on.
You mentioned children's book, and I oh, wait a second. See if you see
Oh,
it.
cute. Yeah.
That's my grandson.
Very cute.
Uh, what do you think about this? Is the last question, because we're at the top of the
Yeah.
hour almost.
Yeah, I got
But
to bounce right at the hour. So, last
give me
question.
your opinion on oatmeal for breakfast versus a more protein centered breakfast.
Yeah, it seems like this is a social media fight. I mean, I'm always a protein first proponent. Like just starting your day with stable blood glucose is so important. You know, they actually did a study having teenage boys eat just oatmeal or eggs, and they ate so much more several hours later when they just ate oatmeal. And I'm not like anti-carb, anti any whatever, but you know, in my overwhelming experience, especially for our young humans who we could do a whole nother hour on just how that their health is getting worse, starting your day with some type of protein going to serve you very well. So,
Gets you ready for the rest of the day.
absolutely.
All righty. Well, okay. Just trying to
Thank you
see
again
if I
for
didn't
having
miss.
me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so hopefully you make it to Hack Your Health. I heard a maybe there.
We'll see. Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so if you do make it, hopefully you stop by. I'm the medical director for Kiltz Health, so we're gonna be there. I think I don't know. I think Doctor Kiltz is speaking as well.
Okay, cool.
So thank you everybody for being here. See you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. in our live stream. And thank you, Michelle, for being here. Check out her books. Her website again is dietitiansdilemma.net. You have a good rest of the day, everybody. Bye.